wanted to do a podcast on boundaries for a long time. It's been coming up a lot in my Instagram community, people asking for resources on boundaries, and it's something I talk about all the time, but I haven't put anything really on the podcast about it. And to be honest, I've kind of shied away from it because it's so case by case. And when it comes to boundaries, I don't want to ever give a blanket statement of like, this is what you do or this is what you say, because with clients, there's so many unique variables, there's so many layers. I'm all about context and don't ever want to give a blanket statement. But I hope that this episode can be a different kind of take and view on boundaries for you. Whatever comes to mind when you hear that word, I'm curious. The reason that this is also so relevant for me right now is I've had to set some extra boundaries in my own life just these past few weeks because if you don't know, if you haven't, followed on Instagram, 2 weeks ago, we put my mom on hospice. And it has just been, to be totally honest, 2 weeks of massive grief for me. What I call dorsal vagal flop mode. If you know anything about polyvagal theory, it's where my nervous system is really in just that shut down, unmotivated, like hard to get going flop state. I feel like I just want to crawl under covers and cry because my mom and I are best friends. And to see her decline has been so stressful on my nervous system. And yeah, it's been a lot. Thank God I have so much support. I'm so grateful for that, beyond grateful. But I don't know if you've heard of the still face baby experiment. It was this study done, this experiment where it's this mom and a baby. You can look it up on YouTube. It's 2 minutes long. And the baby is like, Googling, oohing, not oohing and awing. The mom is oohing and awing. The baby's pointing at things, and the mom is looking where it's pointing, and she's smiling back, and she's interacting. Every time the baby creates some kind of bid for love, the mom responds. And then at halfway through the experiment, the person who's conducting it asks the mom to basically give a completely still face, like no expression, just staring at the baby anytime she's trying to make the mom laugh or anytime she points. And so what happens is the baby starts to freak out, like starts to get so distressed, arches its back, starts crying, is just losing its bleep because the mom is not responding. And my husband and I, we got to see Esther Perel live in DC last weekend. It was so cool. If you don't know Esther Perel, she's like the Brene Brown of relationships. If you don't know Brene Brown, look her up on Google. She is the leader and expert in shame, discovery and research and how to dissolve shame. Both brilliant minds. They actually did a podcast together recently. And anyway, we got to go see her in DC, and she showed this experiment, which I talk to my clients all the time about this experiment just to teach them that, hey, as humans, we crave interaction. And when we're not getting that from our partners, like it's very distressing. But I had never applied it to my mom. And so in the middle of this Esther Perel like lecture, I just start crying. And out of everything that's been said to me through this process of grief, that made me feel the most seen and the most self-understanding of like, that's exactly what's happening to me right now. My mom is not able to respond in the way that she always has. And she has this still face, kind of absent stare, isn't even able to keep her eyes open most of our visit, and I am losing my ever loving mind. It's very distressing. So, all of that to say, I'm going through it. This is a season of grief for me, and I've had to really set some unapologetic boundaries. And that's still new-ish for me. Like, I've gotten so much better over the years. I used to suck at them. I used to suck at boundaries so bad. I would try to implement boundaries, and by that, it would mean like more so punishments, ultimatums, consequences in my marriage. Like, if you don't do this, then this is what I need to do as a consequence for you to keep you under control. Or if this happens again, like, I'm going to kick you out. And that never worked in my marriage for years. I would I remember make lists when I first was trying to figure out how to set boundaries, and I would make these copious lists of all these different possible scenarios that could happen that Sebastian would do or not do that I would have to have a follow-up consequence for. And it was just so stressful. It was like in the moment, how am I going to remember which consequence I said that I would pick for which blah, blah, blah. And I just had such a skewed idea of what boundaries even are. Boundaries are not consequences. So I don't know what comes to mind for you when you think of that word. Maybe just take a second and think when you hear the word boundary, it's the first word that comes to mind. Most people, it's like walls, right? Or distance or, stay away. And my favorite definition ever of boundaries are how I can love you and me simultaneously. It is not a way to push people away. It is not a 30-foot wall. It is a way that you can love another person and yourself at the same time. So when I first started my somatic program, I invested in my first somatic coach for healing my relationship. This was the only thing after a decade of trying every mainstream modality of healing that ended up working. I remember the woman who led that program, my coach, Soraya Bastion. She's amazing if you want to look her up on Instagram. She said, for boundaries, I'm going to make it really simple for you guys. And I'm going to give you one phrase to hold on to that can apply to any situation, any time of the day. You don't have to remember a whole bunch of things you said that you were going to promise yourself in the moments when your boundaries are crossed. Simply remind yourself that when I feel safe, I'll be close. And if I don't, I won't. When I feel safe, I'll be close. And if I don't, I won't. And at the beginning of my deeper somatic healing journey, that was set as my phone background for the longest time. And it was a reminder that I don't need to even know what to say. I don't have to have it all figured out. I don't have to remember any random boundaries or promises that I said that I would keep in whatever moments in my marriage. But in the moment, in the present moment, if my body is feeling triggered or unsafe, I do not need to scoot close to my husband. I can scoot back. I don't have to give a reason why, even. I just need to start this new practice of protecting my energy. So I started focusing much more on my energy and my nervous system than the actual words that were coming out of my mouth to Sebastian. And that was different. That was really, really different. And he felt the difference. If you were to ask him today, a lot of people ask him this question, what changed in your guys' dance? Like you guys were struggling for years, headed towards divorce. What was the turning point? And his answer to that is always the difference in Becky's energy. He felt a difference from me that for the first time, me putting this into practice, me learning how to regulate my nervous system just in quiet, not even telling him what I was doing. He said he felt like for the first time since knowing me, I had myself. I had my own back. I was anchored. I was grounded. I didn't need him to respond a certain way or act a certain way for me to be okay. And that allowed him to feel safe enough to start moving towards me and start being honest with me. Where honestly, for years, I thought I was safe. I would try to convince him, like, you can tell me anything. I'm a safe place. And really, I was holding up this invisible sign that said, I cannot be trusted. That was the energy that I was giving. And the reason for that, for me personally, is I had some deep, deep, deep abandonment wounds that I didn't realize were still sending out a certain vibe. That vibe of, I'm not okay if you're not okay with me. I'm not okay if we're okay, if we're not okay. I'm not okay if you're unhappy with me or if you're mad. And so it made him feel very stifled that he couldn't be himself, that he couldn't express himself authentically. And so boundaries can feel very unsafe to someone with abandonment wounds like me. In my mind, I was so afraid that by taking space, it was going to lead to my worst fear, which was distance. I have this deep, deep, deep fear of distance, separation, abandonment from what I've been through, throughout my life. And a lot of women can relate to that abandonment wound. We talked about that last week on my episode with Julie. So boundaries can feel really unsafe for people, especially with abandonment wounds. And they can just feel unsafe to anyone in general who doesn't have practice or doesn't have training or coaching or a mirror as to what healthy boundaries look and feel like. So, all that to say and validate, this is a hard area for everyone. And what I have found after years of trying on different boundary hats and seeing like all of these different things that didn't fit, what I have found is it really is so much more about our energy and our nervous system than our words when it comes to boundaries. Um, I will say when I started learning to create a different energetic set point of what I was available for, what I would tolerate, what I wouldn't tolerate, it wasn't this graceful response at first from Sebastian, where it was like, the heavens open, and now Becky, now that you have raised your vibes, Sebastian is going to treat you, like the queen you are. It wasn't like that at all. It actually, when I was on one side of the pendulum, right, where for so long I never spoke any boundaries, I never had any kind of vibrational standard of what I would allow into my energy field and how I would allow myself to be treated. It was very like muffled and stifled, and I just, had a very low self-worth. So I kind of allowed people to treat me however. And so after being like that for so long on that side of the pendulum, when I was first trying to learn this, it wasn't graceful. I swung to the other side. And so what we typically do when we're heavy on one side of the pendulum is we do that, we swing. So I remember there was this point in my, healing journey when Sebastian and I were separated. I bought all of these different books. One was something like trying to get inside the minds of angry and controlling men. And now me and Sebastian look at that. I actually never ended up reading it, and we laugh because I was just like, I always thought he was the problem. And it wasn't that he was this angry, controlling guy. It was just we both had our toxic stuff, and he had grief that he wasn't dealing with. And I had abandonment wounds that I wasn't knowing how to deal with on that deep level, even though I was trying. And so, yeah, when I got that book, I decided to start taking notes of like any little interaction where I felt unsafe or offended or like he treated me anything less than the highest respect. And it was actually very helpful, that exercise, just bringing awareness to, oh, whoa, there are some things that are happening in our dynamic that, according to even the definition of emotional abuse, like I've been allowing this into my circle, into my energy field, into my marriage. And so when I started taking these notes, I started speaking up for the first time ever with a very charged energy. And so I remember one time on my way out to, it was like, I think a bachelorette for my friends. Yeah, for my friend getting married, Sebastian was just making jokes that I did not think was funny. And that was an old pattern where I was like, I felt hurt by something. And instead of him responding, with trying to understand what it was that triggered me, he would just be like, I'm sensitive, or don't take it so serious. And so here I am in this era of learning about gaslighting and the definition of psychological abuse. And I just yelled at him on my way out the door. I was like, that's gaslighting. That's psychological abuse. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And I will not tolerate it anymore. And he was like, what the heck? After this quiet mouse, right, of a wife for years, and now here I am yelling at him and calling him an abuser. It was just me fumbling. It was like a new, toddler or whatever trying to learn how to ride a bike. I was awkward at first, and I did not know how to really do this from a grounded energy. And so I just kept practicing, because how else are you going to get good at something other than practicing and failing and practicing and failing and getting up and going over and over and over again? So I did this daily with these new somatic practices that I was picking up from my coach. And so one example of when I actually did start feeling like, okay, I'm getting good at this. This doesn't feel like I'm swinging to the other side of the pendulum. Like this feels more aligned, more centered, more grounded. One boundary I began setting in our relationship was over the elephant in the room or the elephant in our marriage that I felt like was always there. When we were good for all of our right years of marriage. But when we weren't, we were both stuffers. We were both passive aggressive. We grew up in homes where conflict was not talked about openly. And so we were really good at allowing tension to be there and an elephant in the room to be felt, but never spoken about. We just choked on our truth for so many years. And so I remember starting to shift the toxic dance there and letting him know, like, hey, I'm no longer okay for this. If I'm feeling, energy or tension between us, it's toxic for me. It is not good for my body. I notice my body tensing up. I notice, this tightness happening in my throat. I notice my thoughts start ruminating and my stomach start to get all tight and tense and messed up. And that's just not how I want to live my life. It's not how I want to show up for my kids. And the thoughts that are going through my head when this happens are, you're mad at me, or, why am I not able to talk about this? Um, I don't want to be this version of myself. Like I would just start to share the stories going through my head. And then I would share how I felt about this. Like I feel uncomfortable in my own home. I feel unnerved. I feel unsettled, and just sharing some emotions that I was experiencing. I told him what I need is to feel like I can let my hair down and feel safe and at ease in my own home. And for years, I have tried to make me feel that way. I've gone to you to be able to manipulate you or control you or tell you what to do in order for me to feel okay. And for the first time, this is what I'm doing instead. I'm using these new somatic practices. I'm creating safety in my own body. I'm teaching myself how to be okay despite what's going on around me. But if you want to support me in this, and if this relationship is going to have a shot, at healing, which this is what I want. I do want our marriage to heal. I do want us to be able to work this out. This is what I need. I need us to be able to talk openly about things when there's the elephant in the room. So that's just one example of how I started to communicate differently. And it wasn't just my words, guys. It was this different shift of energy, because for so many years, I would try to say stuff like that, like, we need to talk it out. We need to talk about this. But it was from this desperate energy of like, I will not be okay if you don't talk this out with me right now. The shift was I was coming to him for the first time from that grounded energy of learning how to release trauma from my body, regulate my nervous system, get into that anchored place, and be like, look, this is uncomfortable. This is what happens in my body. These are the stories that go through my head. These are the feelings in my heart. These are the needs of my soul. And guess what? I'm going to meet those needs no matter what, with or without you. But I would love so much more for us to be able to do this together. So if you're on board, this is what I need. And so I hope you can feel the difference in energy. But this is what practicing led to. Finally, for the first time, be able to say that and not be terrified that, oh my God, if I express this, I'm not gonna send him away. But even if I did, I got to this point where it was like, even if this sends him away, I will be okay. And I deserve that. I deserve to be in a relationship where I express something as valid as that and it's received with respect. And so it started to change the dance in our relationship, boundaries, and setting a higher energetic set point for what I would tolerate and what I was okay with allowing into my energy was such a game changer for us both being able to get out of that awful cycle and onto a path that was healthy, that was thriving, that was expansive, that was giving both of us and each other permission to be honest as hell in, gosh, ways that neither of us thought would be possible, to be that honest with another human being. Something else I did to keep practicing over and over and over again, raising my energetic set point, was EFT tapping. Emotional freedom technique is what EFT stands for. And if you're listening right now, you can't see what I'm doing, but there's 9 different meridian points that you can tap on, and it's above your eyebrows, on the temple side of your eyes, underneath your eyes, above your lips, on your chin, on your collarbone, on your rib cage or bra strap for women, and then on the crown of your head. Oh, and then the palm of your hand, the side palm, like karate chop. So those points, tapping on them is a way to soothe and regulate your nervous system. But then if you add affirmations to those, it is like affirmations on steroids. Affirmations alone can get us stuck in our head, but when we bring in the tapping, now we're working with the nervous system. And that's the most powerful part to work with when we're working with healing, is with our bodies, because our bodies, if you haven't heard me say this before, okay, we all have this vagus nerve that runs from the base of our skull to the bottom of our spine. And it's the superhighway of information where neurotransmitters are constantly being sent from our brain to our body, body to our brain. Now, 20% of those messages go from our brain to our body, but 80% of those chemical messengers, those neurotransmitters, go from our body to our brain. So, all that to say, affirmations aren't terrible, but if you're like me and many that I've spoken to, we wonder why the hell they aren't working when we're just saying affirmations or doing visualizations. When you add the body into it and include the nervous system and learn to leverage the nervous system while still working with the neck up affirmations, now we're talking. And it's a whole body holistic way of rewiring subconscious limiting beliefs and tapping into the power of the way our bodies are designed and working with our nervous system. So, all that to say, little geek out moment, EFT tapping has been huge for me in shifting my subconscious limiting beliefs over and over and over again. And you can do these with any kind of topic. The first time I learned about EFT tapping was from my business coach, Kelly Brock, and it was about money. And so I was tapping in new subconscious beliefs about money. For so long, I had a scarcity mindset. I grew up where we consignment shopped, where there's nothing wrong with that, but it did teach me this energy of lack, and we could never buy nice things. And there was a fear of spending, and I didn't want to live that way anymore. And so I started for 1 month straight. Kelly challenged us to do 5 minutes of tapping a day. And that was my first ever 5-figure month. And I was like, coincidence or EFT tapping? Let's see. Let's continue and see how it goes. And I've been hooked on tapping ever since. And since then, yes, my revenue and my business, but also I've included now affirmations that has helped growth in other areas like my spirituality and my marriage and my parenting and my health. And it's been so cool just doing different affirmations, including the tapping, and seeing it really change my energy and what I'm attracting into my life and what I am being able to shut out without even saying words. But it's just this new level that I'm vibing at. So it might sound woo to some of you, sounded very woo to me before I started doing it, and now I'm down with the woo. So say it with me right now if you guys want to practice with me. Tap on the side of your palm, like as if karate chop, right? The side. Tap on that with your other hand and say, my energy introduces me before I even speak. My energy introduces me before I even speak. My energy introduces me before I even speak. Now tap above your eyebrows. My energy is my most valuable asset and I protect it. My energy is my most valuable asset and I protect it. My energy is my most valuable asset and I protect it. And now your temples. I protect my energy from people who are committed to draining mine. I protect my energy from people who are committed to draining mine. I protect my energy from people who are committed to draining mine. Let's try one more for fun. Under our eyes. My energy speaks volumes without a single word. My energy speaks volumes without a single word. My energy speaks volumes without a single word. So those are just some affirmations that I like. You can create your own, or you can find ones that you like on Google. Feel free to steal a couple of these. I'll just leave you with 2 more. One quote that can help your energy set point raise if you tap it over and over again is, I am the average of the 5 people I spend the most time with. And the other, I am under no obligation to explain myself to anyone committed to misunderstanding me. Say that one again. I'm under no obligation to explain myself to anyone committed to misunderstanding me. So that's a little bit about energy. As far as, you may be thinking at this point, okay, but where do I start? Where do I start in figuring out where I need to set a clearer boundary? The first place to start, if you want to know where do I need to set some boundaries or raise my energetic set point, is ask yourself, where in my life is there resentment? And this came up so much for me this week. Okay, first of all, my mom, she's in a care facility. Overall, they're great. But I walked in there the other day and she was wet in her bed and had a bed sore, a wound. And if you know anything about caregiving, this is common if people are left in their bed and not turned or changed or kept dry. And I was like, no, like absolutely not. Bulldog Becky came out. I wrote an email and I didn't hear back from the supervisor of this care center for like 28 hours. I was like, okay, I'll give you 24 hours, but no, it was 28 hours. And so I let her know after getting grounded. I said, from a customer service and human experience perspective, I know you have a good heart, so none of this is an attack on your character, just some honest feedback for your family relations department from someone who's been in the customer service industry and a CEO of a company with 15 years of experience serving humans. I said, with a situation of perceived negligence from a family's perspective, it was startling not to hear back from you over 24 hours since I sent that email. And when I did hear back, there was no apology and no empathy or validation of how horrifying that might have been for me to walk in on my mom, who was soaked in her own bed with a large infection on her back. On top of that, the emotional trauma of starting my mom on hospice this week and everything that has brought up in me as her only daughter and she my only remaining parent. Though unintentional on your part, this sends a message to me that my mom is just a number on your list rather than a whole human who deserves the utmost level of dignity, care, and do whatever we can do to make it right energy. And the reason I said that is you would have had to read the email, but it was just it was like a short one-liner, like, yeah, we can't watch her full time. We can check in on her every 2 hours. It was just something very blasé. And I was just like, oh, no, 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 no. So I ended with, thank you for taking the time to hear me out. I said a lot of other stuff too, but I did say, I trust you're doing the best you can and have the best intentions with the resources available to you. And I hope you can hear my heart in the email. She replied, she was like, I feel horrible. Can I call you right now? I'm so sorry. I went in and saw her in person the next day. She put her hands immediately, or her head immediately in her hands, and was like, I feel awful. I'm so sorry. And I was like, look, I hope you know that my heart is just to advocate for my mom. Like, I know you have a good heart. I just had to speak my truth. And to be honest, old Becky would never have done that. But because of somatic work and my good friend Erin Antroyan, who has helped me in this caregiving journey advocate for my mother, I was like, nope, I am saying this. I don't care if it, threatens the people pleaser in me and somebody is mad at me for saying this. Like, this is not okay and I can't tolerate this. This is my mama. And then 4 other people, I think maybe 5, I've like lost count. This is another area I had to set a boundary this week. 4 other people were inviting me to either work with them at a higher level or take part in their retreat. And honestly, all great people who I admire, love, adore, respect, high integrity, all amazing opportunities. But do you know how I felt in each of these moments when all of these people, completely unrelated, were saying, hey, I have this going on, you'd be a great fit, or I think you're ready for this next level? All I felt in each of those moments was resentment. And so I was like, beep, 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 beep. This is an indicator. I need to set a boundary because none of these people are out to get me. I'm not a victim to, this flood of people come in after me, all of those stories that kind of were going through my head. I knew none of them were true. I know resentment just means I need to set a boundary. And so, it was like message after message just saying, thank you for this invitation at the moment. I appreciate you inviting me to this, but I'm going to pass on details at this time. I really feel a pull to slow down and be present with my mom in this season. Sounds fantastic, though. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be rude. It can come off clear and kind. And saying things like, somebody else said, yeah, do you want me to help you figure out how this could work or how I would feel in your situation? And I said, what? I just need a listening ear right now and lots of love. I'm not in a place to hear any ideas or advice clearly. And she received it so well. And she was like, I'm here for you. I love you. Thank you for communicating. So healthy people will empower you and even congratulate you on setting boundaries. It's those who are unhealthy or this threatens their own their own ego, that are going to feel threatened by your boundaries. And so it's really revealing, who is somebody that, right, we can go back to Soraya's quote of, if I feel safe, I'll be close. If I don't, I won't. When you start to set boundaries, it becomes real clear who is inspired by that or supportive of that, and who feels like their ego is too fragile to accept that and feels threatened, instead of like, wow, good for you for taking care of yourself. So, moral of the story, none of us are victims. If we're resentful and feel like people are sucking the life out of us or taking advantage of us or life is happening to us, it's because, whether we like to admit it or not, we've allowed this on some level into our life. Life is not happening to any of us, but so many humans are living in that level of consciousness. We all have the power to decide what we will allow into our space and what we will keep out. And I hope this encourages you this week, just to, even if you don't change anything, just start to notice what feels good and what doesn't. And you don't have to go out and try to set a boundary today, right? Maybe just start to sense into, ooh, this doesn't feel good when this person asks this of me, or when I'm required to do this thing, or just notice if your energy is more have to or should, or if it's like, oh, I get to do this or I want to. And so, one example that I'll leave you with is, you can think of, especially boundaries with people. It's like going back to Soraya's quote, if I feel safe, I'll be close. If I don't, I won't. It comes down to a question sometimes of like, okay, but like, how close can we keep them? And I like to give an example of my house, how certain people are allowed into different parts of my house. I've got my husband and my best friend are the two people who are allowed to sleep in my bedroom, right? When my best friend Courtney sleeps over, yes, we're grown-ups and we're moms and we still have sleepovers. Sebastian sleeps on the couch willingly, and Courtney and I take the king bed. And so nobody else has that privilege, right? Except my husband and my best friend. And then there's some people who I love so dearly, some of my closest friends, and they come over all the time and we host and we hang out in my kitchen. And, that's just where we are. They're not sleeping over in the bedroom, but they're our good friends. And then there's some people like our beloved mailman, right? Who will not ever step foot inside of my house, but we love him just from a bit of a distance. You are staying outside the door. And then there's some people that we would all love to kick across the world to Australia and never see again. So that's just a visual of like, you get to decide how close people are to you, and you can do it in a clear, kind, and loving way. Um, so I'm going to leave you with a couple of questions to reflect on, and I would love to hear what comes up for you. If you want to send me a DM on Instagram, I get so excited to hear just what revelations, come from these episodes. It's so fun to hear feedback. So these are the questions for you to ponder on this week. 1, where's the resentment in my life this week? 2, what subconscious story am I telling myself that's keeping me disempowered? 3, if I could imagine the highest vibing version of myself, what would she say no to right now? Or he. Shout out to all my male listeners. And 4, what would the highest vibing version of myself say yes to right now? So I hope this supports you this week. I've needed this message for myself, and I love you guys. And seriously, also thank you. I have gotten an overwhelming, in the best way, overwhelming, just support in my DMs, flooding with just love and how can I be there for you and praying for you, and such truly kind messages when it comes to what I'm going through with my mom. So I just want to say I appreciate that. I appreciate you guys so much. Love you from the bottom of my heart. And thank you for letting me show up raw and not on my A game this week. This is just me. So go be you. Love you. We'll talk soon.